Hi, for you with Tassus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to have a look at the developing situation at Project Veritas and the attempt, or what appears to be a concerted, premeditated attempt to oust Mr. O'Keefe from Project Veritas, the organisation he founded, for goodness sakes. But there's having had and still involved, having had a long sort of association with the upper echelons of the corporate universe, these methodologies and tactics that they're using against Mr. O'Keefe, the board and their proxies and the people behind the scenes that are obviously pulling the strings here, then it follows a well-worn path. There's not much new that happens in this area. When you get a group of people who want to get rid of somebody, the tactics and the methodologies, the strategies they use are pretty much the same today as they were 100 years ago. Maybe due to technology there might be some slight differences, video recordings and so on, but other than that, the tactics are pretty much the same. Now, if we look at the certainly what's been disclosed into the public domain so far, there's an allegation that appears to be substantiated on both sides. The magnitude and the relevance and the effect of it can be debated, but that Mr. O'Keefe had a dispute with some of the other C-level officers in the company. I think it was the finance and the strategy officer, chief strategy and chief finance officer, who report to the CEO, by the way. Mr. O'Keefe had every right to give them directives, do this, do that. Assuming it's within the law, of course, and he had every reason, based on corporate law, certainly as I understand it, to anticipate or expect or require that his directives would be accepted and acted upon. Not that another C-level executive can't say, well, I think it'd be better if we did it this way, or would it work better if that way, but if a direct directive is given and you get a direct refusal without reason or cause, then the CEO is legally permitted, certainly as I understand it, to dismiss that person. Now, there can be some debate over whether or not they should get a warning first, or given 24 hours to think it over, or go and sleep on it tonight and we'll talk again in the morning. Sometimes when temperatures get raised and there's a rush of blood to the head on both sides, sometimes it can get a little bit feverish and people say things that the next day maybe they regret and that sort of stuff. But typically, insubordination, refusal to accept a directive, is cause for dismissal. Certainly, as I understand the laws there. Typically that involves not other C-suite people, as in C-level executives. Usually it's better to try and work it out. And sometimes I've come across people that for some strange reason, they're having problems at home, or they've something like that. There's something else going on in their lives, and they sort of have this thing where they're feeling weak and exposed, generally, just universally, and people like that tend to, or people in those situations tend to want to hang on to non-issues like a limpet and try and say, well, I'm going to make a moral stand on the paper clips, and I'm prepared to die for that. Those sorts of things, and so you can get someone in an obstinate position. What I've done in the past is say, look, do you understand, Billy Bob? If you continue like this, I will fire you. So I don't want to fire you. I don't want this issue to be what causes things to come apart. So I want you to take a day off, take some time, just reflect on this, have a good sleep, and we'll meet again when we're both thinking more clearly. That I'll try and do it that way. And most of the time, certainly 9 times out of 10, you can sort it out that way. It just takes a little bit of time for folks to calm down. It doesn't always work, but it does most of the time. Now, this idea that one of the C-level officers was refusing to accept Mr. O'Keefe, who's the CEO, refusing to accept his direction or follow his directives. That I'm not quite clear on, and that's not evident yet. It appears to be a tactical disagreement over methodology, which shouldn't really have caused that much drama. But anyway, you got to assume that the relationship was already a little strained, and Mr. O'Keefe dismissed this person. Now, I don't know what the articles of the association of the corporation are, to what extent Mr. O'Keefe may or may not have exceeded the authority of the CEO. But my take on this would be that the board, or members of the board, or persons from the board, are outside influences at least. When I say outside, I mean outside of the C-level executive suite in Project Veritas. And I would say they put this guy up to it. And I mean, I'm not speculating, of course, here. I have no evidence to support that. But given the flow of events and the timing and the sequence and the claims and how it played out, my take would certainly be that outside influences got to this person and told them to pick a fight with O'Keefe, get a dispute going, be as difficult and obstinate as you can, get him to fire you, or if he changes direction, then we can attack. If O'Keefe changes direction based on your dispute, then he's weakened and we can attack him on that. If he refuses if he won't change because of your attack, because of the fight you're picking with him and we want you to pick with him, if he fires you, then we'll attack him on that front. So that I think that the thing was a setup there. Now, when an attempt to get rid of somebody or assassinate them, and this just seems to have a lot of signs of an assassination attempt on Mr. O'Keefe, then, and if that fails, then the people concerned go running for cover, and they have to really allege serious wrongdoing, and that's when they go rushing for the expense account. They can do it at other times if they want to try and get rid of somebody or encourage them to leave without getting all their bonus or all their severance package or something. There are various other tactics there. I'll come back to that in a minute, actually. No, I'm relating a lot of here what is not only my personal experience, but what I observed up front. I've always been very disappointed in the corporate. There's a lot of people there with the lust for money and power, as you'd expect, and wherever there are large pots of money, you're going to get those sort of people. And not everybody there has fully earned their position. Some have got there through brown nosing and sucking up. Others through being useful in extracurricular ways, and there's quite a few CEOs who've hired their marketing director because they met her in a brothel, that sort of thing. She was a high-class hooker. I'll make you a star. And so there's all sorts of people, and people like that tend to resort to very high-handed methods to get their own way. They don't understand. The only thing they understand is power and what they perceive to be its transactional value and use at any given time. And so and they tend to use it in strange ways. This is one example of it with Mr. O'Keefe, and I've seen many more. But coming back to so they get this person, I don't know, it's a man, I assume it is, person to pick a fight with O'Keefe, and then he fires them, and then they go and use that as well, you've overstepped your authority. We have to strip you of your powers. Now, once the board of directors decides to say get rid of the CEO, they've had to have a lot of discussions beforehand. So it isn't just something you appear at the meeting and go, oh yeah, let's get rid of it. It doesn't work that way. there'll have been a build-up to it, and there'll have been the board members will have discussed before. Now, given O'Keefe's a member of the board, then when they were having these discussions, did they have them without Mr. O'Keefe being present or being privy to it? Were minutes taken? Was Mr. O'Keefe given a copy of those minutes? Were these meetings that must have occurred? I mean, there's no question in my mind. Must have occurred. Then were they minuted? You know, were they formal? If they were informal, then why were they meeting without Mr. O'Keefe present? You know, things like that. So there's various questions there that because when they were setting up the assassination, which in my view it's very much looking like it is, there must have been numerous conversations to and fro. And I've got to assume that if it hits any legal, if it gets seriously legal and the lawyers sort of, you know, tool up on each side, that there's going to be disclosure and there's going to be various evidence and phone records and texting and goodness knows what's going to be subpoenaed. So you can imagine some quite embarrassing things could come out of that. Now, coming on to the expenses, where it's alleged that Mr. O'Keefe, when he wasn't eating pregnant women's sandwiches, was misusing his expense account. Now, they're not alleging, certainly from what I've seen at least, they're not alleging outright fraud, but the line between the uncertainty over the expense account usage and fraud, the line is hair's breadth difference. So they could very easily, you know, pivot around and say, well, we're now claiming fraud. Now, based on what I've seen there, they'd have a tough time getting that up. But remember, in this era of activist judges, all they got to do is find a judge that has the right, as they would see it, the right attitudes, and fraud can quickly become a charge they can make stick. And then again, with an activist judge, that could even involve detention time. So the matter's not without risk on all sides. If they don't manage to get an activist judge, then they could. The downside for them isn't criminal. The downside for the ones trying to get O'Keefe is that they just don't succeed. That's the only downside for them. And maybe they got to pay all the legal expenses, or maybe pay out Mr. O'Keefe, $1 million or a couple of $1 million or something. But the sort of people behind the scenes that are pulling the strings, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, that sort of, that's nothing more than chump change to them. So there's no downside for them. On the other side, the potential downside for someone in Mr. O'Keefe's position, given the forces arranged against him, the downside of him is considerable. So he's the one in the most vulnerable position here. Something that I imagine is not lost on him. but on the expense account, this is a tried and tested method. If you want to get rid of somebody, you do a pass through their expense account. Most people have got an expense account that isn't cannot stand up to a forensic audit. I know was one audit done on this clean skin guy. This company wanted to get rid of, and the board wanted to get rid of, and he was a clean skin. And when they said let's go for his expense account, and I was there at that meeting, and I thought, I doubt they'll find anything. They still managed to come up with things like, I mean, not enough to make an issue out of, but like cups of coffee. Say the guy's at the airport waiting for the plane, and he's getting a coffee and I don't know, something to eat, with the coffee while he's waiting for the plane, and didn't get a receipt for it, or the calculation made on the exchange rate, because the guy's traveling internationally. The calculation made in the exchange rate was when the guy got back and filled out his expense account, not at the time of the transaction, when it was recorded on the credit card account. And so the exchange rate was different. So he actually made a few bucks. They were down to that level of so over, I don't know, 2, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it was, they managed to find a few $100s in unreceived cups of coffee. And that was it. And now, given they're so sure that there's going to be, this gold mine of fraud in the expense account, I've got to assume that they do the same thing. Certainly, my eyes were opened this many years ago when I travelled with a VP when I was sort of a junior exec level guy, and he was having hookers to his room and cases of champagne, and he was having a riotous time, and it was all put on the expense account. So these are the sort of people that behave that way, and they assume everyone else does. Now, if they want to get someone to back down on something, and I had a case. This is personal, years ago, where I had a excuse me, I had a bonus that was after so many years of service of the company, provided certain performance benchmarks were achieved, that I had bonuses of about $250,000. This is on top of the other stuff, and it came to the time they didn't want to pay it. The CEO just didn't want to pay it. Now I got this. I was on good terms with the CEO. I'd say we were buddies. I went around, going around to his house, having meals with his family and everything like that. But it came to the point in the end, he didn't want to pay it, or the board didn't want to pay it. I think it was much him as the board. But so he said, look, we'll give you 50,000 instead of 250. We'll give you 50. And that's it. Sign this letter saying that that's all sweet with you. And I, as it turns out, they tried this scam on me like the day before the payment was due. So I assumed everything was fine, and I'd made a number of investment decisions based on the imminence of the term. If they'd given me a few months' notice or flagged it earlier, I would have behaved differently. But given I'd committed myself financially on expecting this payment, I wasn't keen to roll over on it. So I tried to negotiate other deals, and they, to some point at least, tried to negotiate with me. Anyway, I said, no, look, 50,000 is no good. You got to do better than that. And if they'd say it offered something like 170 or something, I would have taken it and walked away. So, but they didn't want to pay anywhere near what was agreed in writing. Everyone's got the letters. They know they're liable for it. So anyway, they're not going to pay the money that they owe me. So they know they're legally liable. It's in writing, absolutely 100% clear. So the only thing they can do now is allege wrongdoing. And so, the only reason we're not paying it is because of this wrongdoing. So they then do go through various, and I've seen this happen to other people as well. They go through various things where, say, let's say, in fact, here's a good example. I was traveling through somewhere on the equator. I can't remember what it was now. Somewhere in South America, perhaps, and it's on business. I'm traveling there. Then the CEO calls me and says, look, I want you in, you've got to go to Stockholm in Sweden, and there's a meeting there tomorrow, and you'll have to leave straight away to get there. And I said, hey, I need to, it's snowing in Sweden, Mum. This is the coldest month of the year in Sweden, and ice and snow everywhere you look. And I'm on the equator. I've got clothes for warm weather and hot equatorial weather. So I got to go and get all my cold weather gear. No, don't worry about it. It's no time. It's not. Look, get whatever clothes you need. Get whatever you need, and just put it on expenses. Okay, just do it. Just go there. Will you do this for me, Billy Bob? Just get. So yeah, sure, boss. Yeah, okay. So next thing you know, I'm trundling off to the airport. That evening when I finished the meetings and heading off, arranging to head off to Sweden. So now, I get there and to Sweden, and again, I've only got clothes for cold weather, so I can jump into a taxi, or I can buy stuff. But it's quite expensive to buy stuff at the airport. Like warm socks and coats and scarves, warm hats, and so on, because it's quite windy in some of those places as well. Like the wind chill factor of you know, minus 5 million and everything. So I buy all that now. I'd ask for, can you put that in writing, boss? Can you? So I've got something in writing saying that you told me to put this on expenses. Yeah. I'll do it, Billy Bob. Can you just go? This is really important. I need you there. This meeting is critical. Billy Bob, again, and this sort of thing. And amidst the drama, and maybe I'd forget to follow it up, or a few weeks later, I'd get an obscure email saying, yeah, your question about going to Sweden, that's all fine with me. Just put it on expenses, but it was vague. You can't relate that directly to the event or the expenses. So when they want to come after you, they say, "Hey, so you've been out just buying clothes for your personal use, have you, Billy Bob?" Yeah, motherfucker, this is fraud. Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to accept our offer for the bonus, or do you want to be taken to court for fraud? I'm simplifying a bit there, but it's if, for a lot of people it would have an impact. They go, "Oh, holy shit!" and they think of judges and courtrooms and da, 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 da. I mean, I was a little bit different, and I had some experience with the argy-bargy of abuse of power and so on. So I was, fuck off. You owe me that fucking money, and that's it. So, and then they have a decision: do they want to escalate? Because they don't really want to escalate. Do they want to escalate it? Will their intimidation tactics work? Will their threats work? Do they want to go even further, or do they want to try and cut a deal? Now, not all, but most people will try and cut a deal. We can't intimidate him. We can't threaten him successfully. We can't get exactly what we want. So we're going to have to cut a deal with him. We're going to have to say, look, okay, what do you want then? We're not going to pay you the 250. And really at this point, say for someone like me, as the way I would perceive it is, you've got to let them have a minor victory, and then they'll accept the situation. But if you make them lose and they think they're humiliated, then they'll be plotting revenge every day thereafter. So you don't want that. So no, I've already said that I'll accept 170 instead of the 250. So I consider I've already given them the grounds to claim moral victory. But then they'll say, well, 170 is too much, and they're already, their nose is already out of joint because their gambit on intimidation didn't work. So I'll say, okay, well, look, I'll accept 145. And then they can claim they won. And now I'm not happy with that, but at least I'm not thinking of it in terms of revenge or getting back at them or anything like that. It's better at this point just to let it go. This is how it happened. This is how it played out, and just let it go. So this idea that Mr. O'Keefe misused his expenses or spent money on things that weren't agreed in writing beforehand, or there was a level of discretion that the CEO had that was exceeded, or things like that. That to me is window dressing to justify the getting rid of him or the attack on him. So they panic. They're in there. It's not looking good. We've got to invent pregnant woman sandwich type stories in order to make him look morally bad, to give us the moral ascendancy. So I'd put all that in that category, and I'd be very surprised. Now, equally, in most organisations, at least, the CEO has a certain level of like sign-off authority. So, I've been effective CEO in businesses where I've had a level of sign-off that say is $100,000, for example, $100,000. So if I want to do any one-off expense at $100,000 or in excess of that, I have to get board approval. Now, sometimes we're in a difficult situation because you'll go to the CEO, so you go to the chairman of the board, and say, look, I want to spend over 100,000. Well, how much more? Well, 110. 110, is that all? Oh, don't worry about it. Just do it, Billy Bob. No one's going to care about 110. Now, at the time you have the conversation, everyone's on good terms and everyone's patting each other on the back. 100,000 going over by 10, nobody cares. It's irrelevant. We love you, you love us, everything's fine. Just do it. So Billy Bob, I'll spend 110. But then a year or two later, or sometime later, when people are not so much in love anymore, then so Billy Bob, you exceed your authority is clearly stated writing is $100,000, and you spend 110. That is in clear breach of the CEO authority, and we're going to fucking fire you because that sort of thing. So you always have to think ahead to say, all right, well, this is fine how we're getting on, and everyone again is in love and all that sort of stuff. But what happens if we're not in love? When people with sinister and malicious intent come along and they look at this, then they'll say, well, that's a breach. You broke the law, motherfucker. And so a very different interpretation depending on whether it's benign or malicious or the interpretation of the event. So I would still always insist on getting it in writing. Now, other ways of doing it that if you can't get in writing, I was quite fastidious about keeping diary notes. Spoke to Jimmy Jack at 11:03 on Friday. Discussed it. Jimmy Jack said. Now, if you're going to go into court and fight a battle there, something that's quite potent is, and I've got people to back off by producing diary notes because they know. I've seen it in court. Were these the diary notes, Billy Bob, that you wrote at the time in the year 1543 or something? Yep, that's it. Okay, all right then. The handwriting looks the same. It's the same pen that was used. So there's a look to think is this authentic or does it look authentic? Okay, Billy Bob, you said that Jimmy Jack. You've got written here Jimmy Jack said. And there's the amount of times I've seen a judge say, I will accept that as reliable evidence, and that's and you can see the look on the other side's face. They go, "Holy fuck, we're fucked." If the judge is going to accept that as evidence, we're done. So even though there isn't an exchange of emails or previous, like in years gone by, letters or faxes or anything like that, those diary notes can count for a fair bit. So my sort of look on take on this with Project Veritas is that they came after Mr. O'Keefe, and there must have been some written agreement on his authority on what he could spend money on and how much and what level and this sort of thing, which must have been subject to other restraints like the company cash flow and the amount of money in the bank or something like that. So that must be in writing somewhere. So if they're going to allege impropriety or Mr. O'Keefe exceeded his authority, it's going to come back to that. Did he in fact exceed his authority, and under what circumstances, or was there approval by the board or some of the board? Now, in most business jurisdictions, and I don't pretend to fully understand the corporate structure of Project Veritas, is that there needs to be a majority of the board and they must be able to hear each other. So if one of the board members, for example, one of the board members in New York, another one in Los Angeles, another one in Dallas, and another one in, Portland, Oregon or something like that, as long as they can be on the phone or say an online meeting or something like that, Teams or something, as long as they can hear each other, that legally constitutes a board meeting. Now, it may not be the most desirable way to have a board meeting, but it legally meets the legal definition of, it's certainly most jurisdictions, meets the legal definition of a board meeting. Now, there may be, say, 6 members of the board, for example, but if 4 of them, a majority, can hear each other and have a meeting, that is considered a legal board meeting, assuming it's minuted and entered into the log and so on. So my take on that would be that the board would need to have convened and to have agreed that there was wrongdoing and Mr. O'Keefe exceeded, but based on what they're alleging, at least, Mr. O'Keefe exceeded his authority. So I think that needs to come out, and until that comes out, it's very difficult to assume that there's been any act by Mr. O'Keefe that may have exceeded that. Now, it could be that there's no clear definition of what constitutes the legal authority of the CEO in terms of sign-off expenditures and categories of expenditure, in which case I don't see how they can claim Mr. O'Keefe has behaved improperly. if there is no written requirement there. So there's a lot more here. I mean, I could go on. There's a lot more to unpack. And as in evidence or information, claim and counterclaim come out, we're going to see this. But it's already a can of worms. The way it's looking from the outside is that there's powerful interests have decided that Project Veritas has to go, and they can't destroy it till they first get rid of Mr. O'Keefe, and then they can destroy the brand and make it as a non-issue, particularly given that now candidates are starting to declare for the presidential election. I think they want Mr. O'Keefe out the way. If they, assuming they get him out, get Mr. O'Keefe out and then destroy Project Veritas or neutralise it, castrate it and so on, then they'll bury Mr. O'Keefe under endless lawsuits, so that he's unable to divert his time and attention and efforts to covering political and related issues anymore. And then as soon as the 2024 election is over, they'll all suddenly decide they don't want to litigate anymore. But they've neutralised him for the required time, which I think is really what this is all about. You've been Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.